Hey party people, let's talk linings. If you're excited about more garment construction videos on my channel, hit the thumbs up button and leave me a comment below saying so. So this video is going to cover what linings are, when we use linings, what materials to use, different styles of linings, design considerations for linings, general construction rules for linings, all the things. So pause this video, grab something to take notes with, and let's do this. Just as a reminder, I come from a fashion design background. I was a fashion designer in the industry for a long time before I transitioned to university teaching and then eventually to YouTube. So my point of view comes from that, working in the fashion industry, thinking about designing clothes to be mass produced and sold. But that being said, I do hope that this video is helpful for anyone who wants to make clothes. Okay? First up, what is lining? Lining is the fabric that covers the inside of a garment. And one of the ways that we inspect clothes, the quality of clothes, is to open it up and see if the seams are finished nicely, if the overlock is messy, if the lining is sewn in properly and in a nice material, okay? All those things are really important. And, I'm going to go over a lot of things, and you might be thinking, who cares that much about linings? But it's really important to nail these things. It can be the difference between a sale and a miss, okay? Really quick, when I say self fabric used in the industry means the outside fabric that's being used the most. And the term contrast fabric is something that's also used on the outside, but not the most used. So let's say I have a baseball jacket and the front and the back body are one color and the sleeves are a different fabric, then the front and back body is the self fabric and the sleeves are the contrast fabric. Now, when I say shell, that's kind of a term that means like the whole outside, both self and 17 contrasts that are used on the outside, the whole outside, as opposed to the lining, which is on the inside. So those are the terms I'm going to be using a lot in this video. Okay? And I want to talk about facings for a hot second, because facings also are part of the inside of the garment. Okay, so facings are a separate piece of fabric used to finish the garment from the inside. And facings are made out of self or contrast fabric, not lining fabric. Some garments are just finished with facings, and no lining, but just strategically placed facings to finish armholes, finish necklines, and the seams are all finished on the inside, etc. Okay, and other garments are finished with a combination of facings and linings. Very few garments are finished with lining only. Okay? The whole piece inside, okay, that folds out to create the lapel of a jacket, this is actually the facing piece. Most of it sits on the inside and is sewn to the lining here. This piece to reinforce the pocket opening, because it's such a high stress point, is called the pocket facing. And this whole edge is stronger because this facing is attached here to the pocket bag. Next, when and why do we use lining? When you're trying to decide whether to use lining or just facings, okay, let's think about the following things. Okay? We use linings when we want some warmth. Okay? Our lining fabrics can actually be even thicker than our shell fabrics. For example, those denim or corduroy jackets with the shearling on the inside, the lining, and it kind of sticks out. And I've designed like leather bombers, varsity jackets with like a fat quilt lining on the inside, or like a thick flannel for extra warmth. 2, we want more structure, a little bit more strength, long wear durability, and linings can really help the garment retain its shape, prevent stretching, and really prolong the lifetime of your garment. Number 3, we want to cover all the seams and interfacing and pads and support structures inside the garment, okay? When you are a garment geek like I am, you tend to think all of that stuff looks really interesting. I love looking at tailored jackets with all the feather stitching and all the details and stuff. I love looking at that stuff, but your average person wants a nice clean finish. For another reason can be it is easier, faster, or cheaper than doing all the seam finishing, all the seams on the inside everywhere, especially if you have a complex garment with a ton of seams. And 5, we want to slip the garment on easily, off and on, which is why linings are often slippery materials, especially the sleeves. And reason number 316 is linings protect the skin from scratchy shell fabrics like a lot of woolens. People do not like to feel the underside of leather against their skin. Okay? Sometimes the backs of fabrics have a lot of loose threads and loops, and you want to cover all of that from being itchy or just like snagging every time someone wears it. Let's talk about designing lining. First of all, there are several styles of lining. The first and most common kind is a full attached lining. It covers the whole inside of the garment and is attached at all the edges, neck, hems, sleeve hems, all of it. Second, unattached lining. So unattached lining is when the lining is sewn in the garment in one part and then loose in the areas, loose in other areas. So for example, the lining of a skirt, it can be attached at the waist and then just not attached at the hem, so it kind of moves on its own. And when you have an unattached lining, you do have to finish the seams somewhat on the inside because people will see all of that. You can also do sleeve lining only, okay? And when would you do that exactly? Most often, let's take, for example, a summer jacket, and you don't want to add too many layers because it'll get hot and sweaty, but it's in a matte fabric, something not slippery, so that it'll be hard to pull on over a t-shirt and then your sleeves will bunch up into the sleeve of the jacket. Not comfortable, not great, right? So you want something slippery for the person to slide over their t-shirt sleeves. So you put in a very nice, light, slippery lining just in the sleeves, and then in the body, no lining, so that it still stays like that nice summery jacket. A half lining is a lining that stops about midway down the length of the garment. So it's in the sleeves, it's all across the back and in the front, but it stops, of course, unattached. And you most often see these in long spring coats, like a trench, where you want the lining for support and strength around the shoulders, but you don't want the extra heaviness and warmth all the way down. Underlining, this is when you cut the shell pieces of your garment, all the outside pieces, and then you cut the same pattern pieces out of the lining fabric, and you sew those two layers together as if it were one piece of fabric. And this is great when you have something where you love the surface pattern or the texture of a fabric, but you want the overall fabric to be thicker and stronger, and so you get the strength of having that lining being sewn into the same seams. Okay? Or, if you have something where it's a little bit sheer, a little bit flimsy, you want that whole thing underlined, or you love the effect of the sheer on top of another fabric, that color that gets created of the two layers, you want to underline those. And there are actually a lot more design considerations when it comes to lining. First up, pockets. You knew this was coming, right? If you don't know about my love of pockets, then you must be new here. Welcome to the channel. Okay? I literally buy men's jackets and men's jeans sometimes so I can get some proper sized pockets. And there are many kinds of pockets. Patch pockets in different shapes, single welt pockets, double welt pockets with a button, welt pockets with a button and a button loop, welt pockets with a zipper, pockets done in a contrast fabric, pockets done in self fabric, pockets, pockets, pockets. Number 2, facings. You have some flexibility in the shapes of facings. Pockets can cut, you can have the facing cut through in the middle of the pockets. Facings can go around the pockets. You can add a little bit of piping along that seam, attaching the facing to the lining, and the piping can be in a wide tape, it can be regular round piping, it could be in a contrast fabric, all these things. And number 3, of course, with linings, you can choose all kinds of different colors and patterns. It does not have to be a color that's close to the shell. It really depends on your brand and customer, okay? Is your customer someone who would really enjoy, a beautiful dressy gray blazer, but have like a really fun zippy lining, like a beautiful blue polka dot or something? Or is your customer more conservative? Or maybe they want more of an investment piece that's not super trendy, so they want like the gray blazer with maybe a charcoal lining, less trendy, more investment basic. So you can decide. When you decide on a lining quality from your fabric mill or distributor, you will get a color card, or you buy a color card. Some people give them out free, not everyone. And the best color cards look like this. So you can pop these little babies out and test the colors next to the self fabric. Number 4, the lining does not have to be all one fabric. I've seen coat linings where they're one color on the top and another on the bottom. This jacket has the inside panels, a different fabric. A lot of different combinations can be made, and you just create a secret for your customers to enjoy, on the inside. 5, you can get rid of your facings and make your garment reversible. Of course, you can't do this with every garment, but if your garment is in a rather simple shape, go for it. And 6, once you understand the basics of lining and how it helps a garment, feel free to have some fun. You can layer fabrics on the inside, like if you have like a beautiful soft lace that's not going to scratch against the skin, you can layer that on top of like a thin but crisp silk that has the structure and support. Okay, so interesting layering up like a sheer print, a sheer mesh, something like that. Or, you can have the lining longer than the shell on purpose. Okay, you can create like a peplum with like layers and layers of ruffles cascading down from underneath a jacket, and it can be structured on the inside like a lining, like an unattached lining. Let's talk lining materials. Okay, we design linings so that they look great, but we choose linings based on what can enhance and complement the performance of our shell fabrics. And really, this is all the more reason to study fabrics and how different qualities can complement each other. My number 1 pet peeve about linings is when silk garments have a man-made lining, a polyester lining on the inside, because all the beautiful qualities of silk are lost. That gorgeous, soft, slinky drape, the breathable warmth. There are inexpensive silks you can use, like Habitite, that you can use for the lining. Like, to me, Habitite is too thin and flimsy to often be used as a self fabric, but it makes for a great lining. Some people call it China silk. I prefer Habitite, whatever. Silk georgettes are another good option. They are semi-sheer, so you have to think about that in the particular design decision. But honestly, there are a lot of silk fabrics that work. You can choose heavier silks for heavier fall winter coats, all those good things. But you know what? I have a whole all about silks video. I'll link that in the description box, where I do a lot of close-ups with different silk swatches so you can learn more about silks. And that being said, always match the weight and warmth of the lining to your garment's purpose. Okay? Don't use a flimsy tissue weight habitat if you're doing a winter coat. Always think about the warmth of the garment with the shell and lining combined. Your spring jacket will be too hot if you use a light outer fabric and then a really stuffy, unbreathing polyester. Okay? I use that term a lot, unbreathing, unbreathable polyester. It's like, especially something that's tightly woven, like a lot of polyester linings, the air doesn't circulate through like it does with cottons and silks. And so all that hot air being stuck in your armpit and close to your body will make you sweat faster than other fibers. You will likely want very light linings for spring summer garments, but just be careful that the linings aren't too sheer, because if the linings are too sheer, you're just gonna see all the unfinished construction under the sheer fabric, and that kind of defeats the purpose, right? When you pick a lining, always think about how you'll wash the whole garment. Okay? Let's say the shell of your dress is machine washable. You're not going to want to put in a dry clean only fabric in for the lining. Who's going to dry clean a dress because the lining needs dry cleaning? That's going to be pretty freaking rare. So, think about how you're going to take care of your garments. And when you think about your care label for your garments, always think about the shell and the lining. One of the most common linings is Bember rayon, also called Cupro sometimes. Rayon and silk are popular linings because they look nice and they don't have as much static cling as other fabrics. Okay? Clingy linings, static cling linings are a no. You can use lighter weight cotton fabrics as lining, but they are not slippery enough for sleeves, most of them. Okay? When you are testing the slip of a lining, okay, don't rub it on your skin. Rub it on a matte fabric, like a t-shirt cotton, okay? And if you're gonna feel that friction and if you feel like it's pulling too much, don't use it. Cotton linings work really well for things that are gonna sit right next to the skin, things you don't want to move. For sleeve linings, cotton's not going to work because you want it to move. You want it to pull your arm through. But if you're wearing like a summer dress that has a really fitted bodice, then yeah, a cotton lining would be great because cotton breathes and it's going to sit right close to your skin. You don't need it to move. It doesn't need to be slippery. Okay, so in that way, cotton linings can work. Let's talk about knits and stretchy linings. Okay? When you choose a stretch lining for a stretch shell, like bathing suit, bra cups, cardigans, all kinds of stuff, the lining must stretch as much or more than the shell. Okay? The lining cannot stretch less than the shell unless you really want to restrict that movement. Okay? Because that's what's going to happen. If the lining doesn't stretch as much as the shell, then you're going to lose the stretchy quality of the outside fabric. Chances are you don't like that. Chances are you chose the outside shell fabric because of how much it can stretch. Chances are you did the fitting thinking about that much stretch. And so always, whether or not you want the inside lining to stretch as much or not, always test the stretch of your lining fabric compared to the stretch of your shell fabric. Just cut two pieces that are the same size and put it right next to a ruler and just check how much it stretches and you will see. Some good stretchy linings are tricot, mesh, even doubling up on the self fabric if it's thin enough. And not all knits stretch a lot. Interlock is a type of knit that doesn't stretch much at all. And what I'm saying about stretch and knits are also true for woven fabrics that have just a little bit of spandex. If you use like a skirt bottom weight that's about like 2% spandex, so just like has some give around your butt, you also have to pick a lining that also has a little bit of give Otherwise, you lose that kind of like that little bit of roominess for when people sit down. Okay? And then what was the point of having the stretchy outer shell, right? So always think about lining and shell fabric compatibility in appearance, in performance, and in how you care for the garment. Pocketing, okay, this is an industry term. Pocketing is a fabric expressly used for pocket bags. And you can actually use lots of different kinds of fabrics for pockets. You can use the self fabric. Okay. You can use the same fabric as the rest of your lining, or you can use a specific pocketing. This is most commonly seen in jeans. You see, denim companies will just buy bajillion yards of a very simple, soft cotton in a neutral color to do all the pockets of their jeans for their brand. All right, so let's talk about some general rules of lining construction. And this was difficult for me because I wanted to give you some guiding principles and some basics, but obviously I can't pattern draft and sew every single kind of lining out there, but I'm going to give you some basics to help you get started. So there is a very, very basic order of operations in making a lining pattern. Number one, you start with a complete shell pattern. Okay, this must be complete. It must be fitted, because if you make pattern corrections on the shell, then you have to go back and revise the lining as well, and that's a big waste of time. So have a complete and fitted shell. Okay, and then you're going to trace out your shell pattern onto a fresh sheet of paper, and then you're going to also transfer your grain lines and your notches. After that, you must make your facing patterns first. Number three, then you're going to make some fit adjustments to the lining. Okay, I'm going to go over more of this in a minute, but with jackets, you're going to want to make the jacket a little bit roomier. And with a very tight, very fitted garment like a bustier, the lining, it can be the same size, or you can like shave off like a millimeter here, a 1/16 of an inch there, things like that. And number four, you're going to go over the whole pattern and make sure you have the correct seam allowances everywhere after you've made your adjustments. Let's add a lining to a woman's blazer with princess seams. The center front will be copied for the facing, and the side front piece will be the lining piece. A lot of jackets also have a back facing. This seam must match. It should flow. The front facing should flow into the back facing if you use a back facing. In the back, generally, it's smoother and easier to remove the princess seams and add fisheye darts. You want to add some wiggle room in the armpit and bust, so we're going to add 1/4 inch out, 1/4 inch up. Okay, so you're adding a little bit more lining. That lining fabric's going to sit over the curve that they have to make over like this. And you want to add that corresponding 1/4 to the sleeve and the back. And always remember to taper out to 0, like just past the waist into the hip. You do not want to add wiggle room to the hem. The lining hem and the self hem should be the same length. Anytime you make adjustments to your pattern, you want to walk your pattern all over again. What is walking a pattern? It's when you line up your pattern pieces where they will get sewn together, and you kind of pretend you're sewing the fabric. You make sure the sew lines are the same length. On a men's 3-panel blazer, or even a women's 3-panel blazer, whatever, you can add about 1/8 of an inch to each vertical seam. That's about 3 millimeters. Okay, this is your wiggle room across the chest, waist, armpits. And no matter, again, how much you add, you distribute tiny amounts across several seams and zero out to the hem. And when addressing the armhole, you want to make adjustments for any shoulder pads you use in a jacket or coat. On jackets and coats for both men and women, you will see a center back pleat to give that roominess I was talking about, especially to accommodate arm movement, or you'll really stress out your sleeve lining and armhole seams too much. And yes, I know I'm adding to the hem, but this is, this will get folded. The pleat will get folded at the hem, so you're not adding length to the hem. In my garment construction FAQ video, I talked about lining the overhang at the hem of a jacket or dress. This is necessary again for the wiggle room, and also it looks nice. Okay, there are things like this when you look, and if you're being stingy with the fabric, it looks cheap. So having this nice fat 1/2 inch lip with a nice center back pleat in a nice fabric, that looks nice. That looks good quality. With trousers and skirts with back darts, you can turn those darts into tucks in the lining, and that will give you that little lining wiggle room around your butt. So again, different styles will require different tweaks, but these are some basics that can get you started. Now there are some areas where you want the lining to finish just at the edge, no wiggle room. Bra cups for bathing suits and lingerie, they're so fitted in such small pieces, you don't want or need the wiggle room, and you don't want to see the lining from the outside. In these cases, you kind of want the lining to finish a hair away from the edge, okay? And you're gonna get that by edge stitching, okay? You want to sew the seam, attaching the lining to the shell, and then you push the seam allowance underneath the lining fabric. You top stitch on the lining, attaching it to the seam allowance, a hair away from the edge. That's why it's called edge stitching. And that also helps it fold back, and you can fold it back and press really nicely, and you create this nice edge with the lining securely tucked in on the inside. And yes, in some garments, there will be parts where you can't edge stitch, you just can't reach. And in those places, you just make sure you press it clean as if there was edge stitching there. Another example where the lining can be smaller than the shell is a very drapey garment, or any kind of garment that has a lot of folds and tucks and drapes on the outside. Let's say you have a skirt that's pleated all the way around. You do not want a lining that mimics all those pleats, okay? It will get bulky and unnecessarily difficult to sew and waste a ton of fabric. So you do a lining in a simplified shape. So if you're doing a pleated skirt, I would draft a simple A-line skirt, make it wide enough so the person can still move their legs as much as they want, but it keeps the shape, it supports the drape from the inside, and it doesn't add too much bulk. Okay, one last bit of info. If you want more info on how to sew linings into garments, here's a book that I recommend, Professional Sewing Techniques for Designers, and it was written by 2 fashion school teachers, and I'll put the info in the description box. It's also in my Amazon book recommendation page, which I'll link in the description box as well. There is a newer edition of this book with a different cover, but the reviews aren't as good for some reason. I haven't seen the newer edition, so I put this older one on my recommendations list. Other pattern books like the Connie Crawford one, the Helen Joseph-Armstrong one, they do give instructions on how to sew in a jacket, but this book, this Professional Sewing Techniques for Designers, this is a really good sewing book, and it goes over a lot of lining styles, so this is the one I recommend for that. All right, and that is a lot of words about linings. I hope this video gave you a good foundation of knowledge on linings. Please give this video a thumbs up if you learned something new today. Share, subscribe, hit that notification bell, all that good stuff. And I'll see you in my next video.